The conference room at Sunset Manor Nursing Home was dead silent, except for the sound of papers rustling, and my son Darius's heavy breathing. I watched from my wheelchair as his face went from smug confidence to pure shock, his wife Keisha's mouth hanging open like a fish gasping for air. The lawyer, Mr. Rodriguez, had just finished reading the most beautiful words I'd heard in 2 years. Mrs. Esther Washington is now the sole owner of Sunset Manor Nursing Home and all its assets, valued at $4.2 million. "That's impossible," Darius stammered, his voice cracking like he was 12 years old again. "Mama, you don't have that kind of money. You're on Medicaid. We had to put you here because you were too cheap and too busy to take care of me properly," I finished for him, my voice steady as a rock. "And now, baby boy, I own the place you dumped me in to save a few dollars." Keisha finally found her voice. "Esther, sweetie, there must be some mistake. How could you possibly—" "Mrs. Washington," I corrected her. "And there's no mistake. My dear friend Vivian left me everything when she passed last month. Turns out my roommate was richer than all of us combined." The look of pure greed that flashed across both their faces told me everything I needed to know about why they were suddenly visiting me for the first time in 6 months. Before we continue, please drop a comment if you've ever experienced something like this. We'd love to hear your story, and subscribe to the channel to help us grow. But let me back up and tell you how I got to this sweet moment of watching my own children's world crumble. It all started 18 months ago, right after my husband Floyd passed away from a heart attack. 62 years of marriage, and just like that, he was gone. Floyd and I had built a good life together. He worked construction, I was a teacher for 35 years, and we raised our 2 children in a little house on the south side of Chicago. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable, with a small savings account and our house paid off. The trouble started at Floyd's funeral. I was still in shock, barely able to function, when Darius and Keisha cornered me at the repast dinner the church ladies had prepared. "Mama, we need to talk about your living situation," Darius said, not even waiting until we'd finished burying his father. "This house is too big for you now, and the neighborhood's gotten rough." I looked around at the same kitchen where I'd raised my babies, where Floyd had drunk his coffee every morning for 4 decades. "Baby, I'm not ready to think about moving. Your daddy just—" "Mama, be realistic," Keisha interrupted, her voice all sweet, but her eyes cold as ice. "You can't maintain this place alone. And frankly, the property taxes are wasted money when you could be somewhere safer, more appropriate for your age." More appropriate for my age, like I was some old piece of furniture that needed to be stored away. My daughter Nia lived in California with her husband and kids. She'd wanted me to move out there with them, but Darius convinced me that would be too much upheaval and that he could keep an eye on me if I stayed local. What he really meant was he could keep an eye on my house and whatever money Floyd and I had saved up. Within 3 months, Darius had me convinced to sell the house. "Mama, you'll have money in the bank from the sale, and you can get a nice apartment. We'll help you find something perfect." They helped me find something all right. A tiny 1-bedroom apartment in a complex that smelled like mildew and had roaches running relay races in the kitchen. But that was just the beginning. Darius appointed himself as my financial advisor, even though his own credit was so bad he couldn't get approved for a gas station credit card. Suddenly, my bills were getting paid late, and my bank account was shrinking faster than ice cream on a summer day. "Mama, inflation is killing everybody," he'd say whenever I questioned where my money was going. "These bills ain't what they used to be." Meanwhile, I noticed Keisha was sporting new jewelry, and Darius had somehow managed to buy a brand new truck. When I brought this up, they got defensive real quick. "We've been working hard, Mama. Just because we're doing well doesn't mean we're stealing from you," Keisha snapped. "That's hurtful that you'd even think that." But I knew something was wrong when I tried to go to the bank myself and found out that Darius had somehow gotten himself added to my accounts. When I confronted him, he got angry instead of apologetic. Mama, you're getting forgetful. Last month you nearly paid the electric bill twice. I'm just trying to protect you from making mistakes. I wasn't forgetful. I was being stolen from. Things got worse when I fell in my apartment bathroom and broke my hip. While I was in the hospital recovering, Darius and Keisha made their move. They claimed I was no longer able to care for myself and needed professional supervision. They found the cheapest nursing home they could locate and signed me up for Medicaid, even though I had money that should have allowed me to choose a better place. Mama, Sunset Manor is just temporary, Darius lied through his teeth. Just until you get back on your feet. Sunset Manor was a warehouse for forgotten old people. The food was barely edible, the staff was overworked and underpaid, and most of the residents sat around all day staring at a television that was always too loud. My room was tiny, with 2 beds separated by a thin curtain. The bathroom was down the hall, and at night you could hear people crying or calling out for help. But there was one bright spot in that dark place. My roommate, Vivian Sterling. Vivian was 83 years old. With silver hair she kept in perfect curls and the most beautiful brown skin that seemed to glow even in that awful fluorescent lighting. She'd been a successful businesswoman back in the day, one of the first Black women to own a chain of beauty supply stores in the Midwest. She never married, never had children, and all her family was gone. "Child, what are you doing in a place like this?" was the first thing she said to me after I was wheeled into our room. "You got family. I seen them visit." "Same family that put me here," I said bitterly. "My son thinks I need supervision." Vivian looked me up and down with those sharp eyes of hers. "Baby, the only thing you need supervision from is them thieving children of yours." That's how our friendship started. Vivian had been watching Darius and Keisha during their rare visits, and her business instincts told her exactly what was happening. She'd seen it before, she said. Greedy children who couldn't wait for their parents to die so they could get their hands on whatever was left. "But here's the thing, Esther," Vivian told me one evening as we shared contraband snacks she'd somehow smuggled from the outside world. "Sometimes the best revenge is just living long enough to see their faces when they realize they played themselves." Vivian and I became inseparable. She taught me how to navigate the nursing home system, how to get the good Jell-O flavors at lunch, and which nurses actually cared about their patients. More importantly, she listened to my stories about Floyd, about teaching, about the grandchildren I rarely got to see because Darius controlled when and how I could contact them. In return, I listened to her stories about building her business empire from nothing, about the discrimination she faced, about the loneliness of having money but no family to share it with. We played cards, watched old movies, and complained about the terrible food together. For the first time since Floyd died, I felt like I had a real friend. What I didn't know was that Vivian was quietly doing something that would change my life forever. 6 months into my stay at Sunset Manor, Vivian started getting sicker. She'd always been healthy and independent, but suddenly she was tired all the time and barely eating. The doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong, but I could see her getting weaker every day. "Esther," she said to me one night, her voice barely above a whisper, "I need to tell you something important." She pulled out a folder from under her mattress, filled with papers I couldn't quite read in the dim light. "I've been watching how your children treat you, baby. And I've been watching how you treat everyone else in this place. You're kind to the nurses even when they're having a bad day. You help that man with dementia find his room when he gets lost. You share your snacks with people who don't have any visitors." "That's just how I was raised," I said. "Exactly. And that's why I've made a decision." She handed me the folder. "I'm leaving you everything, Esther. My houses, my investments, my business holdings, all of it." I nearly fell out of my chair. "Vivian, I can't take your money. You barely know me." "I know enough. I know you have a good heart, and I know your children don't deserve a penny of what you've already given them. But more than that, I know you'll do something good with it." She made me promise to keep it secret until after she was gone. 2 weeks later, Vivian passed peacefully in her sleep. I held her hand as she took her last breath, crying for losing the best friend I'd had since Floyd died. The funeral was small. The lawyers were there, a few people from her old business, and me. Darius and Keisha didn't even know Vivian had died because they hadn't visited in over a month. After the service, Mr. Rodriguez, her lawyer, pulled me aside. "Mrs. Washington, I need to schedule a meeting with you next week. There are some documents Mrs. Sterling left that require your immediate attention." I had no idea what he meant until I was sitting in that conference room, listening to him read Vivian's will. She'd left me everything. Houses in 3 different states, stock portfolios worth millions, and most importantly for my current situation, she'd left me ownership of Sunset Manor Nursing Home, which she'd apparently bought through a shell company 5 years earlier when she first moved in. "Why didn't she ever say she owned this place?" I asked Mr. Rodriguez. Mrs. Sterling believed in observing people when they didn't know they were being observed. She wanted to see how the staff treated residents when they thought no one important was watching. She also wanted to see what kind of person you really were. Vivian had been testing everyone the whole time, and somehow I'd passed. Mr. Rodriguez explained that Vivian had spent the last months of her life setting up trusts and foundations to make sure her wealth would be used for good. But the nursing home and a substantial personal inheritance were mine to do with as I pleased. The first thing I did was fire the nursing home administrator who'd been cutting corners on food and staff while charging families premium prices. The second thing I did was give every employee a raise and improve the meal service. The third thing I was about to do was let my children know exactly what I thought of how they'd treated me. That's what brought us to today, with Darius and Keisha sitting across from me looking like they'd seen a ghost. But this ghost had $4.2 million and was about to make their lives very interesting. "Now," I said, folding my hands in my lap like I was about to discuss the church bulletin, "let's talk about my grandchildren. When's the last time I saw Zara and Caleb?" Darius shifted uncomfortably. "Mama, you know the kids have school and activities?" "Mr. Rodriguez," I said, turning to the lawyer, "could you please explain to my son what happens to people who financially abuse elderly family members?" The color drained completely from Darius's face as Mr. Rodriguez opened his briefcase and pulled out another folder. Mr. Rodriguez didn't even blink as he spread the documents across the mahogany conference table like he was dealing cards in the most expensive poker game of my children's lives. "Financial elder abuse in Illinois carries serious penalties," he said in that calm lawyer voice that somehow made everything sound more terrifying. "We're talking about potential felony charges, restitution payments, and civil liability that could reach into the hundreds of thousands." Keisha's hand flew to her throat like she was choking on her own guilt. "We never abused anybody. Esther, tell him we were just trying to help manage your finances." "Help manage?" I laughed, and it came out harder than I'd intended. "Baby, the only thing you managed was to steal nearly $40,000 from my accounts over the past year." Darius tried to stand up, but his legs seemed to give out and he plopped back down in his chair. "Mama, that money went to your care, your bills, your expenses." "My expenses?" I pulled out my own folder that Mr. Rodriguez had prepared for me. "Let's see. My expenses apparently included payments to Riverside Motors for your truck. My medical needs covered Keisha's jewelry from Zales. And somehow my prescription costs paid for your vacation to Cancun last spring." The silence in that room was so thick you could cut it with a butter knife. Darius opened and closed his mouth like a fish, while Keisha started crying those fake tears that had gotten her out of trouble since high school. "Mrs. Washington," Mr. Rodriguez continued, "we have bank records, receipts, and a paper trail that clearly shows systematic theft of your assets. Your son used his access to your accounts to fund his lifestyle while placing you in the cheapest care facility possible." "But I'm family!" Darius finally exploded. "That money would have come to me eventually anyway." The words hung in the air like a slap across my face. There it was. The truth he'd been hiding behind all those fake smiles and "we're just worried about you, Mama" conversations. He'd been counting on me dying so he could get his hands on whatever Floyd and I had worked our whole lives to save. Eventually, I repeated slowly. So you decided to speed up the process by stealing from me while I was still breathing? Mr. Rodriguez cleared his throat. Mrs. Washington, given the evidence we've compiled, you have several options. You can file criminal charges, pursue civil litigation for damages, or... He paused and looked at me with those serious lawyer eyes. You can offer them a chance to make this right. I leaned back in my wheelchair and studied my son's face. This was the same little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, who I'd walked to school every day for 6 years because he was too scared to go alone. The same child I'd worked double shifts to buy school clothes for, who I'd sat up with all night when he had pneumonia. When had he stopped seeing me as his mother and started seeing me as a bank account with an expiration date? What kind of chance? I asked quietly. Full restitution of all stolen funds with interest, plus a formal apology and an agreement that they will have no involvement in your financial affairs going forward. In exchange, you don't press criminal charges. Keisha started nodding frantically. Yes, we can do that. Esther, we can pay back every penny. It might take some time, but... With what money? I interrupted. Y'all spent my money on trucks and jewelry and vacations. Where exactly are you going to get $40,000 plus interest? The room went quiet again, and I could practically see the wheels turning in their heads. They were doing the math and realizing they were broke. All their fancy purchases had been made with my money, and now they had nothing left to give back. We could sell some things, Darius said desperately. The truck, Keisha's jewelry. Used truck and pawn shop jewelry won't come close to covering what you stole, Mr. Rodriguez pointed out. And that doesn't address the pain and suffering you've caused your mother. I watched them squirm for another minute before I spoke up. There is one thing I want more than money. Both of them looked at me with hopeful eyes, like maybe I was going to let them off easy because I'm family-oriented and forgiving. I want to see my grandchildren. Not supervised visits where you monitor every word I say. Real visits. Overnight stays. Phone calls whenever I want to talk to them. The hope died in their eyes immediately. Mama, that's not... the kids have routines, and with your living situation... Darius stumbled over his words. My living situation? I own this place now, remember? I can live wherever I want. I leaned forward in my chair. But that's not really what you're worried about, is it? You're worried about what I might tell Zara and Caleb about how their parents treated their grandmother. Keisha finally stopped crying long enough to get angry. You wouldn't turn our children against us. Turn them against you? I shook my head. Baby, I don't need to turn them against you. The truth will do that all by itself when they're old enough to understand it. That's when Darius played the card I'd been waiting for him to play. Mama, you need to think about this carefully. We're your only family here. Nia's in California with her own life. You push us away, and who's going to take care of you when you really need help? The threat was clear as daylight. Stay quiet about the theft. Don't make waves, or lose access to the only family I had left. It was the same manipulation they'd been using since Floyd died, playing on my fear of being alone. But what Darius didn't understand was that I wasn't the same scared widow who'd let him talk me into selling my house. Losing Vivian had taught me that real family isn't always blood. Real family shows up when you need them, not when they need something from you. You know what, baby? I said, and my voice was steadier than it had been in months. I've been taking care of myself just fine. And if you think threatening to abandon me is going to make me roll over and play dead, you got the wrong mother. I turned to Mr. Rodriguez. File the criminal charges. Mama, no. Darius jumped up so fast his chair fell backward. You can't be serious. I'm dead serious. Y'all want to treat me like I'm already in the grave? Then you can deal with the consequences of your choices. Keisha started that ugly crying where her makeup runs everywhere. Esther, please. Think about the children. Think about what this will do to the family. I am thinking about the children. I'm thinking about what kind of lesson you're teaching them by stealing from their grandmother and lying about it. I'm thinking about how you've used them as weapons to keep me quiet. I looked directly at Darius. And I'm thinking that maybe it's time for someone to show them what integrity actually looks like. Mr. Rodriguez was already pulling out his phone. I'll contact the district attorney's office this afternoon. Given the amount involved and the vulnerable victim status, this will likely be prosecuted as a felony. Wait, Darius said, his voice getting higher with panic. Let's think about this rationally. I am thinking rationally. For the first time in 2 years, I'm thinking crystal clear. I looked around the conference room that now belonged to me, in the building that now belonged to me, surrounded by lawyers who now worked for me. You want to know what's rational? What's rational is me finally understanding that y'all never cared about my well-being. You cared about my bank account. The door opened, and a woman in scrubs peeked her head in. Mrs. Washington? I'm sorry to interrupt, but there are some people here to see you. We're in a meeting, Keisha snapped. The nurse ignored her completely and spoke directly to me. Ma'am, there's a young lady here with 2 children. Says she's your daughter, Nia? My heart nearly jumped out of my chest. Nia was here? From California? Send them in, I said immediately. Mama, this isn't a good time, Darius started, but I cut him off. This is a perfect time. The door opened wider, and there was my baby girl. At 45, Nia still looked like the little girl who used to help me braid hair on Saturday mornings. Behind her were my California grandchildren, Aiden and Maya, looking around the fancy conference room with wide eyes. Grandma? Nia said, and I could see the confusion on her face as she took in the scene. The expensive lawyers, the scattered documents, her brother looking like he'd seen a ghost. Baby girl, I said, opening my arms. What are you doing here? She rushed over and hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. Uncle Jerome called me. He said you were sick and in some nursing home and that Darius told him you didn't want visitors. She pulled back and looked me in the eye. But that didn't sound like you, so I flew out to see for myself. I shot a look at Darius that could have melted steel. Uncle Jerome was Floyd's brother, and apparently Darius had been feeding him lies about my condition to keep people away. I'm not sick, baby, but there's definitely been some sickness going around this family. Nia looked around the room again, taking in Mr. Rodriguez's briefcase full of legal documents and her brother's guilty expression. What's going on here? Before I could answer, 8-year-old Maya tugged on my sleeve. Grandma, why are you in a wheelchair? Uncle Darius said you couldn't walk anymore. Another lie. I'd been using the wheelchair because the nursing home required it for transport, but my hip had healed months ago. I stood up slowly, my legs a little stiff from sitting, and watched Maya's face light up. Uncle Darius says a lot of things that aren't true, sweetheart. Nia's expression was changing from confusion to anger as she started putting the pieces together. She'd always been the smart one, making Dean's List in college while Darius barely graduated high school. Darius, she said, and her voice had that edge it used to get when we caught him lying as a kid. What exactly have you been telling people about Mama's condition? Nia, it's complicated, he started, but she held up her hand. Uncomplicate it. That's when Mr. Rodriguez decided to introduce himself. Ma'am, I'm Mrs. Washington's attorney. We were just discussing some financial irregularities that have come to light. Nia looked from the lawyer to the documents on the table to her brother's sweating face. Financial irregularities? Your brother has been systematically stealing from your mother's accounts while she's been in residential care, Mr. Rodriguez said in that matter-of-fact lawyer voice. The temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. Nia turned to look at Darius like she'd never seen him before in her life. You stole from Mama? It's not what it sounds like, Keisha jumped in. We were managing her expenses, making sure her bills got paid. By buying yourself a new truck with her money? Nia's voice was getting louder. By taking vacations while she's stuck in some nursing home? 10-year-old Aiden was looking back and forth between the adults like he was watching a tennis match, clearly not understanding what was happening but sensing the tension. Nia, let's discuss this privately, Darius said desperately. No, let's discuss it right here, right now, in front of everyone. Nia pulled out her phone. Because I want to record this conversation for the family members who couldn't make it. Now it was Darius's turn to go pale. If word got back to Floyd's family about what he'd been doing, he'd be cut off from everyone. The Black family grapevine doesn't forgive financial elder abuse. Nia, put the phone away, he said. Make me. She hit record and pointed the camera right at him. Go ahead, brother. Explain to the family how you stole from the woman who raised you. That's when Keisha made the mistake that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Nia, you don't understand. Your mother was getting confused, making bad decisions with her money. We were protecting her. Protecting her by putting her in the cheapest nursing home you could find while you bought luxury items with her savings? She's old! She doesn't need fancy things anymore. The words came out before Keisha could stop them, and the silence that followed was deafening. Even the kids knew she'd said something terrible. Nia stopped recording and put her phone away, but not before I saw her hit the share button. Whatever had just been recorded was already on its way to family members across 3 states. Grandma doesn't need fancy things anymore? Maya repeated in that innocent way kids have of cutting right to the heart of the matter. But Grandma's the fanciest person I know. Out of the mouths of babes. Nia knelt down next to my wheelchair. Mama, I am so sorry. If I had known... You couldn't have known, baby. Your brother made sure of that by lying to everyone about my condition and keeping people away. She stood up and faced Darius with the kind of fury that only a daughter defending her mother can muster. You kept me away from her for almost 2 years with lies. You made me think she was declining mentally and didn't want visitors. Nia, I can explain... No, you can't. There's no explanation for what you've done. She turned back to me. Mama, you're coming home with me. Tonight. Actually, I said with a smile, I think I'm going to stay right here. Everyone looked confused, so I decided it was time for the second big revelation of the day. Nia, meet your new family business. I now own Sunset Manor Nursing Home, along with some other properties and investments that were left to me by my late roommate. I gestured around the conference room. This meeting wasn't just about the theft. It was about me deciding what to do with my new assets. Nia's mouth fell open. You own this place? Lock, stock, and barrel. And the first order of business is making sure every resident here gets treated with the dignity and respect they deserve. I looked pointedly at Darius. Something I should have been getting from my own family. Mr. Rodriguez cleared his throat. Mrs. Washington, there's one more matter we need to discuss. The criminal charges against your son. Nia looked confused again. Criminal charges? Elder abuse and theft charges, I explained. Your brother faces serious jail time for what he's done. Good, Nia said without hesitation. He should face consequences. Nia! Darius looked shocked. I'm your brother! My brother died the day you decided to steal from the woman who sacrificed everything to raise us. Her voice was cold as ice. I don't know who you are anymore. That's when we heard shouting in the hallway outside the conference room. Loud voices, multiple people getting closer to our door. The shouting stopped right outside, and then the door burst open without anyone knocking. Standing in the doorway were Uncle Jerome, Aunt Velma, and 3 of my cousins, all looking like they'd driven straight through the night to get here. Uncle Jerome's face was thundercloud dark, and Aunt Velma had that expression she used to wear when she caught kids stealing from the church collection plate. Where is he? Uncle Jerome boomed, his voice filling the whole room. At 78, Floyd's older brother still had the presence of a man who'd spent 40 years as a construction foreman. "Where's that thieving boy who's been lying to his mama's family?" Behind them, I could see more family members filling up the hallway. Word travels fast in Black families, especially when someone's been caught doing something shameful. Nia's video had apparently made its way through the family WhatsApp group faster than gossip at a church fish fry. Darius shrank back in his chair like he was trying to disappear. "Uncle Jerome, let me explain." "Explain what? How you stole from Esther while telling us she was too sick to have visitors? How you put this good woman in a nursing home while you spent her money on toys for yourself?" Aunt Velma pushed past her husband and came straight to me, her arms open wide. "Baby girl, I am so sorry. If we had known what was really going on." I hugged her tight, breathing in the familiar smell of her perfume mixed with hair oil. These were Floyd's people, my people, and they'd been kept away from me by lies. "It's not your fault, Vel. You believed what you were told." "Well, we know the truth now," said my cousin Denise, holding up her phone. "That video Nia posted has been shared 47 times in the last hour. Everybody knows what happened here." Keisha was looking around the room like a trapped animal, finally understanding that their secret was out and there was nowhere to hide. "This is a private family matter," she said weakly. "Private?" Cousin Robert laughed bitterly. "You made it public when you stole from an elder in this family. That makes it everybody's business." Uncle Jerome pulled out a folding chair from somewhere and sat down heavily next to me. "Esther, you tell Uncle Jerome what you need, and it's done. You need a place to stay? You got it. You need money? Whatever you need." "Actually," I said, feeling stronger surrounded by real family love, "what I need is for everyone to understand what's about to happen here." I looked around the room at all the faces, my real family who'd come running when they learned the truth, my grandchildren who were finally getting to see their grandmother be strong, and my son who was about to face the consequences of his choices. Darius is going to be arrested for elder abuse and theft. That's not negotiable. But before that happens, I want him to understand exactly what he's lost. I turned to face him directly. "You think you're going to inherit my money someday? Boy, the only thing you're going to inherit from me is the knowledge that you threw away your mother's love for a truck payment." "Mama, please," he whispered, and for the first time, he sounded like my little boy again, but it was too late for that. "You want to know what hurts the most? It's not the money. It's that you made me feel like I was a burden, like I was worthless, like I was just taking up space until I died so you could cash in." The room was dead quiet except for Maya sniffling. Even an 8-year-old could understand that something terrible had been broken. "But here's what you didn't count on," I continued, my voice getting stronger. "You didn't count on me finding real family in this place. You didn't count on someone seeing value in an old woman you threw away." Mr. Rodriguez cleared his throat. "Mrs. Washington, the police should be arriving shortly to take Mr. Peterson into custody." "Peterson?" Uncle Jerome looked confused. "Boy, what happened to the last name your mama gave you?" "He changed it when he married Keisha," I explained. "Didn't want to be associated with the Washington family name anymore, said it would be better for his credit." The look of disgust on Uncle Jerome's face could have curdled milk. "You threw away your family name too?" Before anyone could answer, we heard footsteps in the hallway, and 2 police officers appeared in the doorway. "We're looking for Darius Peterson," the taller officer said. "That would be me," Darius said quietly, standing up on shaky legs. "Sir, you're under arrest for financial exploitation of an elderly person. You have the right to remain silent." As they read him his Miranda rights, Keisha started that ugly crying again. "Esther, please don't let them take him." "Think about your grandchildren." "I am thinking about my grandchildren," I said firmly. "I'm thinking that they deserve to see their grandmother stand up for herself. I'm thinking that they need to learn that actions have consequences." The officers led Darius toward the door, but he stopped and turned back to me. "Mama, I love you. I know you don't believe that right now, but I do love you." I looked at my son, this man who'd stolen from me, lied to me, isolated me from my family, and made me feel worthless. And I felt something I hadn't expected. Not forgiveness exactly, but a kind of sad understanding. "Darius," I said quietly, "love isn't just a word. Love is action. Love is showing up. Love is protecting the people you care about, not using them." I paused, watching his face crumble. "Maybe someday you'll understand the difference." They led him away, and the room fell silent, except for Keisha's sobbing. "Ma'am," the second officer said to Keisha, "we'll need you to come down to the station as well for questioning." After they left with Keisha, the family gathered around me like a protective wall. Uncle Jerome was holding one of my hands, Aunt Velma the other, and Nia had her arms around my shoulders from behind. "What do you need from us, baby girl?" Aunt Velma asked. "Right now? I need to show my California grandchildren around their grandmother's new business empire," I said with a smile. Over the next hour, I gave Naya and the kids a tour of Sunset Manor, explaining my plans to transform it into the kind of place where elderly people could live with dignity. We visited the residents I'd become friends with, including Mrs. Chen, who taught origami, and Mr. Williams, who told the best stories about his days playing jazz in Chicago clubs. "Grandma," Aiden said as we sat in the sunroom, "are you really rich now?" "I suppose I am, baby. But you know what makes me feel richest?" "What?" "Having a family who shows up when I need them, having friends who see my worth, and having the chance to make sure other people get treated better than I was." Maya climbed into my lap. "Are you going to live here forever?" "For a while, sweetheart. This place needs someone who cares about it, and these people here have become my friends." "Can we visit you more now?" Aiden asked. "As often as you want. In fact," I looked at Naya, "I'm thinking about setting up a trust fund for the kids' education. And maybe looking into some investment properties in California." Naya's eyes widened. "Mama, you don't have to—" "Baby, I spent 2 years being told what I didn't need and couldn't have. Now I'm going to spend whatever time I have left deciding for myself what I want to do with my money and my life." 6 months later, I was sitting in the same sunroom, but everything had changed. The walls had been repainted in warm colors, there were plants everywhere, and the smell of real food was coming from our new kitchen, where we'd hired an actual chef instead of just reheating frozen meals. Mrs. Chen was teaching origami to a group of kids from the local elementary school who came by twice a week as part of our intergenerational program. Mr. Williams was playing piano for the residents who gathered every Friday for our music hour. The place buzzed with life and laughter instead of resignation and sadness. I was reviewing the applications for our new scholarship program, something I'd set up to help kids from low-income families pay for college, when one of the nurses approached me. "Mrs. Washington, you have visitors." I looked up to see Zara and Caleb, my Chicago grandchildren, standing shyly in the doorway with a woman I didn't recognize. "Grandma?" Zara said tentatively. She was 14 now, looking so much like her mother at that age it made my heart ache. "Come here, baby girl." I opened my arms, and she ran into them like she used to when she was little. Caleb, now 16 and trying to look tough, hung back until I gestured for him to come closer. "You too, grandson." The woman with them introduced herself. "Mrs. Washington, I'm Sandra Ellis from Child Protective Services. The children have been staying with their maternal grandmother since their parents. Well, since the situation with their parents." I knew the situation. Darius had been sentenced to 3 years in prison for elder abuse and theft. Keisha had gotten probation and community service, but she'd lost her job and was struggling to keep their house. The kids had been bounced between relatives for months. "We were wondering," Sandra continued, "if you might be interested in having the children stay with you sometimes. They've asked specifically about visiting their grandmother." I looked at Zara and Caleb. these babies who'd been kept away from me for so long, who'd been told lies about my condition, who'd been used as weapons in their parents' manipulation games. "How do you feel about staying with me?" I asked them directly. "We want to," Zara said immediately. "We want to get to know you again. Really know you." "I'm not the same grandma you remember," I warned them. "I'm stronger now. I speak up for myself. I don't let people walk all over me anymore." Caleb smiled for the first time since he'd arrived. "Good. We don't want you to let people walk all over you." "Then yes," I said to Sandra. "Whatever paperwork needs to be filed, file it. These are my grandchildren, and they have a home with me for as long as they want it." Later that evening, after we'd had dinner in the dining room with my nursing home family, and after Zara and Caleb had been introduced to everyone and heard stories about their grandmother they'd never known, we sat in my private suite. I'd had the place renovated to include a small apartment with 2 bedrooms so the kids could stay whenever they wanted. It was the first time in 2 years that I'd had control over my own living space. "Grandma," Zara said as we were getting ready for bed, "I'm sorry we didn't visit you more before. Dad always said you were sick and didn't want to see us." "Baby girl, that wasn't your fault. You were told lies by people you trusted. But now you know the truth." "What's going to happen to Dad?" Caleb asked quietly. It was the question I'd been dreading. How do you explain to kids that their father is a criminal without destroying their relationship with him completely? "Your daddy made some bad choices," I said carefully. "He's going to have to face the consequences of those choices. But that doesn't mean he doesn't love you, and it doesn't mean you can't love him." "But he stole from you," Zara said, her voice angry. "He lied to us about you." "Yes, he did. And that was wrong. But he's still your father, and you'll have to decide for yourselves what kind of relationship you want to have with him when he gets out." We talked for another hour about everything. About Vivian, about the nursing home, about my plans for the scholarship program, about their school and their friends and their dreams for the future. When they finally went to bed, I sat in my chair by the window, looking out at the garden we'd planted where there used to be a parking lot. Tomorrow, I would meet with the architects about expanding the facility to include more private suites and a community center. Next week, I would fly to California to visit Naya and her family, and to look at some properties where we might open a West Coast branch of our scholarships program. I thought about Floyd, and how proud he would be to see me standing up for myself. I thought about Vivian, and how grateful I was for her friendship and her incredible gift. I thought about my son, sitting in a prison cell, hopefully learning the difference between love and manipulation. But mostly, I thought about the future. At 73 years old, I had been given a second chance at life, and I wasn't going to waste a minute of it. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Nia. "Mama, saw the news article about your scholarship program. So proud of you. Love you." I smiled and typed back, "Love you too, baby girl. See you next week." Then I put the phone down and looked around at my home. This place I'd once seen as a prison, but which had become the foundation for everything good in my new life. Tomorrow there would be more challenges, more decisions to make, more lives to touch. But tonight, I was exactly where I belonged, surrounded by people who valued me, with grandchildren sleeping safely down the hall, and with the knowledge that sometimes the worst things that happen to you can become the door to the best things you never imagined possible. I'd learned something important in these past months. Respect isn't something you can demand from people, but you can absolutely demand it from yourself. You can refuse to accept less than you deserve. You can walk away from people who treat you badly, even if they're family. And you can build a new family with people who see your worth. At 73, I'd finally learned how to put myself first without feeling guilty about it. And that, more than any inheritance or business empire, was the most valuable gift Vivian had given me. The knowledge that I was worth fighting for, even if I had to do the fighting myself. Thank you for staying with us through this journey. Please subscribe for more stories and drop a comment. We read every single one.